So recently we actually reviewed Polaris Lance, but inside of PvP. And don't get me wrong, Polaris is a force to be reckoned with. But at the end of the day, it is a scout rifle, and only so many scout rifles can even hang in this current sandbox, especially considering our map rotations. With that being said though, where Polaris Lance truly shines is inside of PvE, especially when we combine it with the exotic, the Path of Burning Steps. Now I know you're probably thinking, Cross, what's so special here? Path of Burning Steps, you got the Firewalker perk, so the Final Blows, grants you bonus to weapon damage. You can do this with any solo weapon. You can, but it gets a lot nastier when you pair it with Polaris Lance. And that's actually because Path of Burning Steps actually scales ignition damage. Now this season we have a variety of weapons that actually cause ignitions, whether it's 1000 Voices with its new Solo 3.0 interactions, Skyburner's Oath, Prometheus Lens, hell you can even dip into things like Sunshot or even Yoke. But the weapon we landed on to be one of the best weapons this season is Polaris Lance. And that's because the perk Perfect Fifth got a rework. Essentially guys, Perfect Fifth shots apply 40 plus 20 scorch stacks instead of a custom burn. Now I brought this up inside of PvP. I actually said that this was pretty much a nerf, because back in the day you could actually 2-tap and watch Guardians burn out. But now you don't do that. Scorch does not actually burn you out. It gets you to one shot. And that's the thing about Scorch. That's how Bungie has worked around balancing Solo 3.0. Scorch causes damage over time, but will never kill you. Whereas Ignitions, that is the goal of Scorch, is to apply 100 Scorch and cause an ignition. Now for Polaris Lance here, the beautiful thing about the scout rifle is that landing back-to-back Perfect Fifth shots grants you an ignition. Now before we get too deep into the fragments and aspects, I do want to talk about Perfect Fifth. This is the intrinsic perk found on Polaris Lance, but precision hits return ammo to the magazine. Matter of fact guys, that perk alone is nutty when you're actually just sitting there doing single target damage. You can literally just lay on the trigger for as long as you want. As long as you are landing precision shots, you will be auto reloading your magazine indefinitely. Now, landing 4 precision hits loads a delayed solar explosive round for your next shot. Now, it's because of that explosive shot that you're actually applying Scorch. This of course applies damage over time, and landing a back-to-back Perfect Fifth will spark an ignition. Another beautiful thing about Polaris Lance is the moment just got a buff, so literally landing just one shot on any enemy stabilizes the hell out of this weapon. And on top of that, you also have the exotic catalyst, where precision kills create an elemental damage explosion. And considering you're going to be prioritizing precision shots, and it's going to be so easy to land here with Polaris Lance, this is no problem. Now let's talk about the damage scaling real quick. Ignitions. This one's an interesting one, because ignitions is normally something that's completely separate and only really tied to our Solo 3.0 subclass. But when we combine it with Path of Burning Steps and Firewalker, every other solar kill is granting us a stack all the way up to 4 stacks. Now again, it requires 2 kills in order to grant you 1 stack, but the first stack is 20% more damage, 2 stacks is 25%, 3 stacks is 35%, and a long time ago, it used to just cap out at 35%. Like when it first came out, Firewalker times 3 to times 4 literally stayed the same, which was a head scratcher for all of us. But Firewalker times 4 actually grants you a 40% buff in damage. Now this is obviously really nice here for Polaris Lance, especially considering this can stack with our surge mods, and you can apply multiple surge mods. So for 1 surge mod here for solo weapons is 10%, 2 surge mods is 17%, 3 surge mods is 22%. And you can see here guys where the damage is scaling, literally cranking up across the board here for Polaris Lance. These are substantial buffs if you can maintain them. For instance, from top to bottom, if you were to have Firewalker times 4 as well as 3 surge mods, you're looking at roughly a 70 to 71% increase there in damage, which is hot. Now what about our ignitions? This is where things get interesting. Again, I did not know this until Cobra pointed this out, but ignitions here on Carl is 42,717. This is with no buffs, just base ignitions from any source. But Firewalker times 1 actually cranks our damage up to 51,261. Guys, this is a 20% increase in damage. The same 20% that you saw there to our solo weapons is also being applied here to our ignition damage. And from top to bottom, we see each one of those stacks, 25%, 35%, all the way up to 40% increase in damage to our ignitions. Now the other question, does surge mods also stack with ignitions? Why, yes they do. Here are the damage numbers now. But finally, you can take both Firewalker and surge mods, stack them together, and this too scales our ignition damage. Top to bottom, fellas, for ignitions, you're looking at a 70 to 71% increase in damage. So again, not only are your solo weapons doing more damage, but the ignitions themselves are also doing doing more damage. You can imagine things like 1000 Voices, which are procting ignitions often, and a number of other weapons out there that have Solar 3.0 synergy would obviously do very well with Path of Burning Steps. Again, as long as you are landing solo weapon kills, you will be granting yourself Firewalker damage buffs. In our case though, we just found Polaris Lance to just be such a safe option. Like, I'm literally soloing this Master Law sector and I'm just sitting back, laying on the trigger, letting Polaris Lance do all the work for me. There are ignitions constantly going off and they're grabbing kills. They're literally grabbing AoE kills, and every other kill is giving us another stack to our buffs or even topping off our buffs, literally amplifying the damage by just laying on the trigger. And the beautiful thing about this is the auto-loading feature Polaris has when landing those crit shots. Now let's dive into our fragments as well as our mod choices. First up, I am rocking a number of different solar surge mods. I'm also rocking time dilation, 2 of them to be exact, so they can last longer, as well as Reaper. We've got 2 charge up mods, a single solar loader mod as well as a firepower mod, and heavy handed with harmonic siphon so that I can generate orbs upon scoring those 2 kills with the weapon matching my subclass. Now for our fragments, we have Ember of Eruption, where our solar ignitions have increased area of effect. You can see where this is so beneficial when landing the multi-shots, the snag and ignition, and kill the adds around a heavy health target. We also have Ember of Char, where solar ignition spreads scorch to affected targets. Ember of Ashes, where we apply more scorch stacks to targets. This just kind of gives us a little bit of wiggle room if the target that we're hitting is actually losing scorch stacks. And then we have Ember of Singeing, where our class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets. Granted, that last one, you can really swap it out for anything you want. I mainly was utilizing that because I'm taking advantage of Reaper. Now, if you're looking to lean more into survivability, you can slot out a few of these fragments and go for Ember of Tempering, where solo weapon final blows grant you and your allies increasing recovery for a short duration. Really good here, but the main takeaway for this is that while Ember of Tempering is active, solo weapon final blows create a fire sprite. You can also pair this with Ember of Mercy, where when you revive an ally, you and other nearby allies gain restoration, but picking up a fire sprite also grants restoration. Again, there's a lot of different combinations you can go for. Literally just slot things out depending on whether or not you're running solo or with a fire team. I'm also taking advantage of Solo Invictus, where solo ability final blows, as well as Hammer of Solar Impact, and defeating scorched targets create sunspots. Now this is a beautiful thing because previously Polaris Lance could do this pre-Solo 3.0, but then after Solo 3.0, because it wasn't actually scorch, it cannot spawn sunspots. You literally can spawn sunspots though with Polaris Lance, which is beautiful. Considering you're going to be applying scorch to so many different targets, you can see how easy it is to spawn these. You also have Roaring Flames, where final blows with solar abilities or ignitions increases the damage of your solar ability, stacks up to 3 times. And I'm actually rocking Fireball Grenades because if I do get into a situation where I'm landing enough ignition kills and I want to throw one of my Fireball Grenades, which by the way, this season, we have these artifact mods right here, which are amplifying our Fireball Grenades and giving us double Fireball Grenades. Having a couple stacks of Roaring Flames is no problem. Now granted, this is not an ability-based build. Like, I know we're proccing a bunch of ignitions, but if you're looking to really get the most out of Fireball Grenades this season, feel free to check out this build right here. We'll even have a link to it in the description below. It's a very nasty build, and it's purely relying on Fireball Grenades. And again, you always want to throw your Fireball Grenades directly onto an enemy, as you can spark an ignition with every single throw. Again, the goal of this build is really to take advantage of Polaris Lance and its ability to proc those ignitions as often as possible. Now, last thing I want to mention about this build is that it actually synergizes with so many different exotics, including the Rage Shotgun Conditional Finality. Yes, even the ignitions from Conditional Finality will scale here and increase in damage with Path of Burning Steps. However, if you're looking to really break the bank on damage with, say for instance, 1000 Voices, keep in mind Firewalker is an empowered buff, as in it will not stack with Well or Radiant buffs. It just simply overrides it. Essentially, the highest damage buff takes precedence. I know, it's unfortunate. I wish it did, guys, but that's the reality of things. Still doesn't mean it's not good. And again, for run and gun situations where you're not sitting in a well or by a bubble, or you don't have a means of proccing Radiant buffs, this is very, very good. So guys, that's it. That is the build. Play with Polaris Lance, rock it with Path of Burning Steps, and you've got a hell of a combination in this sandbox. By the way, Scout Rivals have unstoppable rounds this season. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.